let's pop up the Ourlads depth chart because I know there's only so many of them they can get to during the day, and they're going to continue to update and work on them. But maybe because A starts the alphabet, we were very fortunate that this one, I believe, is as updated as any. So let's start first of all on offense. So it looks pretty set, of course, at quarterback. You know, there's good backup. You can't ask for a better backup than Jacoby Brissett. And, we can talk Kyler Murray all day, but that's not really necessary. The running game, tell me a little bit about the back end of that, about that running unit, because Connor, you think he's going to give up some additional snaps this year to Benson? That's one question. And then I see Bam Knight is still there. Do you think you think he'll be able to hold on to that roster spot when it's all said and done?
Well, to address the first question about James Conner, I believe that's the plan. I believe the plan is, and they've talked about it this offseason, both Conner and Trey Benson basically both being kind of as a co-RB1 situation or 1A, 1B. Conner will get the bulk of them, but I believe the plan is to get Benson much more work than he did last year, and they've been preparing for that. He put on almost 10 pounds bulk, so now he's 6'1", 220 to go with that breakaway speed that he's got.
Nice.
He had a good showing towards the end of last year and gives him really a nice 1-2 punch. The news is kind of the surprise over here in Arizona is that Bam Knight replaces DJ Dallas. DJ Dallas, who is one of the better returners in the NFL and a solid special teams player. Bam Knight unseated him with a really solid preseason. The thing about Knight, that if you don't know much about him, he was an elite kickoff returner in college. And so he's bounced around a little bit, but it would appear that he's found a spot at the very back of the roster. My guess is because he's back there that he and Greg Dortch will probably handle kickoff returns this year.
Okay.
Because that's the role that DJ Dallas had. Now, Dallas did other things on special teams. I don't know if Knight's going to be quite the core special teamer that Dallas was, but the Cardinals did keep a couple, like two of their safeties. One of the, and we'll get to that, is that Joey Blunt was one of the core special teamers, and their 7th round pick, Keaton Crawford. They kept 11 defensive backs. I think one will probably go, but Crawford, because they got an extra special teamer at a different position, they were able to let Dallas go and turn the return duties. I'm guessing because he got return duties late in the preseason. That'll be Bam Knight back there for the dynamic kickoff.
Well, well, I know Bam Knight well. He started off with the Jets, and it was one of those deals where I remember, taking a look at him in college and see what kind of running back he was, and felt that, okay, he played well in college. He's one of these players. He's a running back. You know the whole deal with running backs. You never know. You can get a 7th rounder. You can get a free agent. They could turn into an excellent player, more so than probably any other position on the roster. And that's exactly what I thought the Jets had with Bam Knight. And it was really down to it was really just a roster crunch for him with the Jets. They had so many running backs at the time, they just couldn't keep them. So Detroit actually wound up holding on to him for about a year or so. And I think he got hurt, and there was some injuries there. But the kid looks like he's healthy right now, and I think he's got talent. So I think that's a nice back end 3rd, 4th guy that if there are injuries and you need somebody to spot start or spot contribute, I think that's a good young player to keep an eye on.
Absolutely. He did seem to offer far more upside in the offensively than Dallas.
Yes. No doubt.
And I think they're probably on par. Like, if you followed him in college, how great a kick returner he was, and so that'll probably his primary role here.
Okay. Tight end. We know how good McBride is. They drafted a tight end last year in round 3. So most teams keep 3 to 4. 4 is the usual number. How are they looking right now after McBride? I mean, what do you think about these three players that they have on the rest of the depth chart?
I really like all four of those players. Tip Ryman is a monster blocker, monster. Like he is, like, well, one, he was an elite blocker coming out of school last year. With his size, he's massive, and then he does have the athleticism. He does have really high upside with his athleticism that he can be more than that. He hasn't been asked to do more than that, and but Tip Ryman is a monster sized individual. He's a mean, big blocking guy who pancakes guys right and left. And so you've got that pairing of elite pass catcher in McBride, who is a capable blocker, with an elite blocker in Ryman. And Higgins is a really nice pairing with them because he can do a little bit. He's smaller because he's a former receiver he played receiver at Stanford. He converted to tight end, and he does a lot. He's not the volume pass catcher that McBride is, but is versatile. He can play the blocking role. He can be a pass catcher. He can play H back. But basically, if you're kind of you're trying to pair every role, that should anything happen to Trey McBride, Higgins would go into that
Okay.
McBride role.
Okay.
And Travis Vokolek is like every back of the roster primary blocking tight end. Like he is kind of that. I think every NFL team has a guy like Vokolek, but the Cardinals really like him. They picked him up, signed him up Baltimore's practice squad in 2023. He was on the roster all last year, though only active, I think, for a game. They carry four, but only three are ever active, and so Vokolek is probably that guy. But basically, it gives them someone who can play exactly the role that Ryman has, and Higgins can play exactly the role that McBride has.
Makes sense. Okay. Wide receiver. And if they're going to take another step, they're going to need some more action out of this group here, especially Harrison and Michael Wilson. Interesting that this unit's really gone many different directions over the last several years. I mean, it looked like they were loading up just a few years ago, and now it's kind of back to being a unit on paper that just is like more top heavy with two guys that look like they could really break out in Harrison and Wilson. Zay Jones, of course, is a steady veteran. So tell us a little bit about what you like about the unit. And I see Xavier Weaver is a player that I would guess is more of a special teamer, gunner maybe. Tell us a little bit about the unit.
Harrison obviously he's the catalyst. Like, it basically everything in the wide receiver room starts with Harrison. They already have because you have a Trey McBride who can catch 100 plus passes a year. You've already got one of your top two pass catchers on the team. Yep. Harrison had a fine year last year. It wasn't a bad year. It was underwhelming for what expectations were, and especially when you compare it to the years that Brian Thomas and Malik Neighbors and Ladd McConkey had. But I'm always going to follow it up with this. While I will 100% admit, because there were many times last year, Harrison looked like a rookie. There were times when he wasn't on the same page as Kyler Murray, that he just ran wrong routes, there were times he looked like a rookie. He's bulked up. He looks massive now. But I always say this, let's also remember, 62 catches, 885 yards. Honestly, that's the second best rookie receiver season the Cardinals have had in their entire history. Anquan Boldin beat it, but his numbers matched basically his father's rookie year, Larry Fitzgerald's rookie year. He's number two in rookie receiving yards, just Anquan Boldin. Like, he beat Frank Sanders, he beat Larry Fitzgerald. He tied Anquan Boldin and Larry Fitzgerald for receiving touchdowns by the rookie with 8. Solid year. And the thing I always point out is that look at the role that McConkey, that Thomas, and that Malik Neighbors had in the offenses they had. They were number one period. Like Malik Neighbors was out for because he was like, well, he got concussed and then fatigued. They spammed him. Those were the option. None of those other rookies had anyone anywhere near the ability of Trey McBride on their roster as well.
Yeah.
And so what should Harrison be this year? He should be one of the great outside receivers. He shouldn't be just okay.
And you're seeing that in the preseason and training camp. All the signs are there. Okay.
The yard plus, like basically what you would expect, the combination of Harrison and McBride.
Okay.
You should expect 2,000 to 2,200 yards between the two of them is what I would expect minimum out of them. If Harrison's getting 1,100, tight end is hard to get 1,000 every year, so maybe his production is a little lower because Harrison's increases.
Sure.
But 2,000 to 2,200, 2,100, 2,200 yards between the two of them. Michael Wilson, he's a solid. As a number 2 receiver, if you look at just the receivers, you could do better. You could. But he's also basically wide receiver 3 in the pecking order of targets.
Yep.
And Tyler Murray believes in him. The team believes him. Like, he's got a skill set where he could break out and he could be a 1,000-yard receiver. But he also offers that he's a really good blocker. He's a very avid blocker in the run game, which the Cardinals need. So he's a big body. He's not just a body out there pretending to, he will go and block guys. He hasn't cracked that 600-yard mark yet. It would be ideal. It would be ideal. So if we're talking about production, we get 2,200 yards between Harrison and McBride. If you can get 750 plus out of Wilson, or 5 to 600 plus from multiple guys in that receiver room, and then you're starting to look like that passing offense is going to be. What's interesting is that they list Greg Dortch here as their primary slot guy. I think that's a little bit inaccurate. That's how it looked last year.
Okay.
Zay Jones has shown to be, since late last year and all through the preseason this year, that Zay Jones is actually wide receiver 3.
Okay.
And while he's not really the slot receiver, Michael Wilson got most of the slot work, and so they're going with size. Greg Dortch will definitely still have a role. He will play in the slot. He's a gadget guy, but when they go 3 wide, primarily it's going to be Harrison, Wilson, and Jones, with Wilson mostly sliding inside of the slot.
Okay.
And that way it gives them size. And then you've got 3 receivers at 6'2" or higher in that receiver room. And then you've got the 6'3", 6'4" Trey McBride on top of that.
Okay. And Weaver, what's his role?
Weaver is going to be interesting because he could do things on special teams. He's a guy that can play multiple positions. I'm not sure if the receiver room will end up looking just like this. I suspect that Simi Fehoko, who they cut today, he's got $1 million in guaranteed salary, and he's a vested vet, so he's not exposed to waivers. But because I expect 2 moves, I expect Justin Jones to go on injured reserve, and I expect something to happen, maybe a trade from the defensive backs. Keeping 11, I don't think is feasible. And then they will bring back up Fehoko to fill the special teams role that Zach Pascal had the last 2 years. And I think Weaver he's a guy that, if Fehoko's back, will be inactive, but I see him as a better version of Greg Dortch a year from now, because he does a lot of the same things that Dortch does. He's a good insider. He can play the slot. He's got some speed. He's got some size. He is leaner. He's leaner, but Dortch is not big at all. So he can play inside. He's got some downfield speed, and he can return punts. And so if you kind of look at Weaver, I look at him as next year's Dortch, who can fill in. I don't know that they would put him in the same role that Zach Pascal, because Zach Pascal was a big receiver. Simi Fehoko, a big receiver, 6'40", 220, 6'4", 220, a guy that can do things on special teams. And so my guess is when the roster settles, Fehoko will be back on the roster or will come up from the practice squad to play special teams, and Weaver will probably be inactive on most days.
So Weaver is just not one of these back of the roster players that will be on the practice squad or even cut. He's just here for now. He's a guy that you think that they're
They like him. They
developing.
like him.
They
Yes,
like
I
him.
believe that's what they're doing.
Okay. All right. Offensive line, and this is very important for Arizona. This is something that they really haven't been able to get right as a unit for a while. So what's the jury like now with the unit? How do you think it is compared to the last couple of years? Is it any better?
Um, Basically, it's the same, honestly, because the 4 of the 5 spots are what they were a year ago. Paris Johnson, he's on the verge of becoming a great tackle. Evan Brown was quite solid. He returned on a 2-year deal. He didn't get paid the crazy guard money that was going around this offseason, but he was probably their most consistent lineman all last year. Very solid. Yelda Froholt, they love as a center. The one change, Jonah Williams, who only played in 6 games. So if he's healthy, the line's better than last year because
Okay.
Kelvin Beachum was solid, but Jonah Williams is a higher upside player, and
Sure.
he missed most of last year, injuring his knee twice. There is one major change. Will Hernandez, who left in free agency and tore his ACL last year. Isaiah Adams has filled that last year's 3rd-round pick out of Illinois, is taking over that right guard spot. But the Cardinals recently re-signed Hernandez. He has not practiced, but apparently he started off on the pup list in the preseason. They took him off and put him on the active roster, and they only have like Josh Fryer is their 9th offensive lineman, undrafted rookie tackle. The way things stand right now, it would appear that the Cardinals expect him, unless they expect him to be able to practice and to fill the backup guard spot, at least initially. Because when they brought him back, Isaiah Adams is the starter. They were going to get Will healthy, and then once he's healthy and practicing, then they will figure out who's going to be the starter. But Adams has impressed this offseason by all accounts. Now, Will Hernandez, very, very good, very solid starting offensive lineman. Got a little bit of nasty to him. He's tough. He's mean. A mover in the run game, pass blocks better than you'd expect him to. But he's also 30 years old and coming off an ACL tear.
Yeah.
So having him as depth is excellent, because should Adams falter, should Adams get hurt, should Evan Brown get hurt, that means you have a legitimate above average NFL starter that you can bring in from the bench.
Okay, so obviously a key is going to be, can Jonah Williams play a full season?
Correct.
He's had issues doing that his entire career, even though he's still, in the prime of his career. He's not an old player. And Isaiah Adams, if he could take that next step as a young player. So on paper, it just looks like run of the mill average type center, offensive line, excuse me. But you feel that if everything goes well, they have the opportunity. They could be a much better unit than people think.
Yes, they're cohesively. Like, if you look at individuals, the only individuals that you look at as only being, he's a great talent. You look at Paris, and honestly, you look at Jonah Williams too. But everyone else is. But as a unit, they were a solid unit last year. Their run game was fantastic. Their pass blocking metrics were really good. That said, I will say this: they look good in part because Kyler can do a lot to make them look better.
True.
He can get away from initial pressure so that there isn't pressure, so that count doesn't count as a pressure. Yep. But that is it. That's together playing cohesively is an above average unit. And if you have an above average unit with good playmakers and a solid quarterback, you don't need a great line. You've got a capable line. And especially with the improvements that they made to the defense, I think that's going to be the kicker. They were a top 10, top 12. I think I don't remember it was top 12 in one metric, but basically a top 10 offense last year. They need baby steps forward, because they were productive. Just a couple of steps forward on offense, and they're fine. If last year is the baseline, if they do at least what they did last year with more consistency, they're doing what they need offensively to win games. The problem was last year, their defense, which metrically looked better than it was. They were right in the middle of the pack in points allowed. but they were awful on third down. They were awful at
Okay.
pressuring the quarterback. They were awful at creating turnovers and were last and second to last in plays allowed per drive and time allowed per drive. The only saving grace for them is that they were good on fourth down. And so they were a very disciplined, scrappy group that was undermanned for most of the season. And so while they would be solid for some things, they would give up long drives and then field goals, and it would put the offense into tough situations, which late in the year, which led to some of those turnovers that people talk about with Kyler Murray late last year. They lost a 1-point game to the Minnesota Vikings. They lost a 6-point game to the Bills to open the season. And they did nothing to stop the Vikings defensively. They could not stop Josh Allen. And had they been able to do they lost in overtime to the Carolina Panthers. They let Bryce Young run wild. They let Chuba Hubbard rush for over 200 yards. And so if you look at what they were last year, the 8-9 team, they were perfectly mediocre because 8 of their 9 losses were to teams that won 10 or more games and mostly made the playoffs. The only bad loss was their only bad loss was to Carolina. If they had beaten Carolina and if they had beaten Seattle once, we're looking at a playoff team. And they beat the teams that were worse than them. They lost to all the playoffs teams they played. They lost to the 10-win Seahawks. And then the inexcusable thing, their bad game was Carolina.
And that was later in the year, right?
Yes, it was.
And Carolina was playing their best football, so
they were. Still,
all right.
Don't give up 36 points to the Panthers if you're trying to go to the playoffs. Nope.
So offensively, then, as bad as the defense let them down, what was the issue offensively that hurt them at the end of the season?
It was consistency.
Okay.
They had consistency issues, and so they looked great, and then they would look bad. And then honestly, it was turnovers. It was because Kyler, who's been a great quarterback at taking care of the football, he threw 7 interceptions in the final 7 games. I mean, 8 interceptions in the final 7 games. And so, and now some of you look at some of those, there were reasons for that. Like none of them were actually bad decisions. 2, I think, came on 4th down throws where you had to get rid of the ball anyway. Sure. Another was a failed throwaway while we were still in the pocket. You couldn't make it look like a throwaway. You couldn't throw it away, or it's grounding. But then it was a great play. But yeah, many of those were bad situations. There were a couple of bad picks, but mostly they weren't bad decisions. They were critical situations where plays weren't made. And so
in other words, are they at this point right now with Kyler where it's like, okay, you're a vet now. You've seen it all. We've got a good enough group around you. No more excuses. Get the job done.
Absolutely. Now, the coaches absolutely believe in Kyler, but yeah, that is more or less the vibe here. Is that if there have been a number of reasons you could have, as a Kyler fan personally and a Kyler apologist for a lot of things, you can explain away a lot of why he hasn't been the great, like the top 5 quarterback in the NFL. There's a lot you can explain why. Like, is he that guy? No. Can he be that some years? Yes. But this is the year that I think they put everything together talent-wise around it. Like, if you look, they built from 2019 to 2020 to 2021, and then Kyler played at an MVP level. Like, there was a 5-game stretch in 2020, looked like an MVP. The first half of 2021 played like an MVP. The second half of the season, the team kind of fell apart. He got hurt. J.J. Watt got hurt. They didn't have the James Conner and Chase Edmonds in 2021. The second half of the year, the entire second half of the year, only one was ever in the game. They never played together. They lost their top cornerback in Robert Alford in the second, which really tested that depth. And so if you look at 2021, and I'm not going to predict that the Cardinals do a 2021 again, but if you look at what they had in 2021, their defense, what made them so great, their defense overperformed expectations. Instead of being a run-of-the-mill defense early in the year, they were a top 10, top 5 defense for that first half of the year, which let Kyler play without having to force throws. And what did Kyle look like? He looked like an MVP. When the injuries mounted and that defense fell apart and DeAndre Hopkins got hurt and James Conner got hurt and J.J. Watt was lost for the rest of the year, basically, when the depth was tested, then things fell apart. 2022, abject failure. It was a dumpster fire from everyone involved. Say dumpster fire. Then he tore his ACL. 2023. Terrible roster in 2023. He comes back from the ACL, no training camp, and he plays very average. Last year, you have a mediocre team. He looks good. He looks great sometimes. He looks okay sometimes, and they made some mistakes. And so this year, it was a bad defense. And now this year, they have a defense that should be something better than bad, should be above average. And if that defense does that with playing at least at the level of the offense, we could see an MVP level Kyler again, because that was the recipe for 2021. I'm not going to predict that he's going to be MVP, but I think he's going to play so much better this year. I think he's going to play a whole lot better this year.
Before we go through the defense, just one more thing on McBride, and this is good for fantasy fans. Is there any reason to think that now that he's got the touchdown, that he can't come out and have like a 7-8 touchdown season? Or is there something with the Arizona offense that once they get into the red zone, they don't really design plays as much as they should with McBride? Or, what was the whole deal holding him back from scoring touchdowns? And is there any reason to think that a player as good as he is shouldn't score 8 or 10 touchdowns this year?
So last year was 100% an anomaly. Like, it was like he scored the 2 touchdowns. Now, we can remember he also rushed for a touchdown. That's good for fantasy.
Yeah.
He scored a touchdown on a fumble recovery in the end zone. So he scored.
He knows how to get into the end zone. Yes.
Yeah, he scored 4 touchdowns. But what was wild last year, what was comically bad about just they had connections. I can think of 5 times last season where should have been a touchdown. Either there was the one against the Rams. The Cardinals probably would have beat the Rams late in the year, and he just didn't get his head turned around. Hit him in the helmet. Should have been a catch. Should have been a touchdown. There was a couple where Kyler missed him. He was wide open. Kyler missed him. Kyler missed it. There was a couple others, a tough catch that McBride should have made because he's that kind of player, but didn't. So there were probably at least 4 more touchdowns on the table that just were missed. I consider last year 100% an anomaly because he'll get the targets. Now, is he going to be an elite touchdown scorer? That's going to be really hard to do when you've got a James Conner near the goal line, when you've got Marvin Harrison, who's also, he scored 8 touchdowns, and he's going to be a frequent target in the end zone. And so can you count on him to get double-digit touchdowns? No. 6, 7, 8 touchdowns. I think 100% is something what you should expect from him consistently, because last year it was just comically tragic how that was.
Yeah. It got nuts there for a while. All right, so you talk about the defense being better this year. So one thing that we have to talk about, let's just slide down here, are some of the injuries, because injuries have definitely affected the defense, not so much the offense. But I can see 4, 5 contributors here on defense that have some sort of ailment, maybe 6. So give me an update on the injuries first on defense, maybe even starting with their top pick, Walter Nolan.
So yes, Walter Nolan. That's really the one that you're like, oh, that's really a bummer, because they went through it last year with Darius Robinson. Darius Robinson injured his calf right before the last preseason game, right before the season. Was designated to return, only played in 6 games, and then had, as he came back, something he either didn't respond well. It wouldn't say it was a setback, but it didn't progress as quickly. And on top of that, his mother died. And so he missed time with that and ended up being a lost rookie season. And we're like, oh, that's right, Walter Nolan, he's fantastic. And what does he do? The week before training camp, he injures his calf in training with the team. And so he misses the entire preseason, which is that's a bummer. I think this is going to be a cooked rookie year for Nolan.
Really?
Because, and not because of the talent, but he has thus far 0 full contact live reps as a rookie.
Yeah.
That's really tough to overcome. So even if he's healthy and he gets back to practicing, he's not getting the developmental practice. He's getting game practice. And so he's going to have to miss at least the first 4 games. I don't know how close he is, but I would expect almost 0 contributions from him for the first half of the season and minimal the rest of the season. But luckily they have. So we'll see him back, and I just don't think he'll be impactful as a rookie. Year 2, 100%.
Okay.
B.J. Ojulari, he's a mystery to me. I will say this. He tore his ACL a year ago, more than a year ago. It was at the beginning of training camp last year when he was expected. Like, they had high hopes that he was going to be their alpha pass rusher, and he had the talent to do it. Tore his ACL. And, if you tear your ACL in August, right, what are you expecting? You're expecting him to be ready and gearing up for the regular season. He's not. He's still on pup. He hasn't practiced. And so I worry about that. But at the same time, the Cardinals basically moved on roster-wise as if B.J. Ojulari doesn't exist.
Okay.
Because they signed Josh Sweat. They brought back Baron Browning. They've got Zaven Collins, and then they drafted Jordan Birch.
Okay.
And so, even that was one of the questions. If they had activated him, what's his role going to be? Because he went from being, you're the guy, to now you're just a guy. You're just a guy now, because Josh Sweat is their alpha. Zaven is he led the team in sacks last year. I will say this about him. He's pass rushing. His pass rushing skill set is the weakest part of his game. But everything else that you want from an edge defender, he does at a very high level. He's a great run defender. He moves really well in coverage. He's very smart. He can blitz off the inside. He can drop into coverage. He's just not a sack producer.
No.
And there's still upside for him. He improved to have 5 sacks last year. Baron Browning, he is a solid pass rusher. I don't expect him to be, could he break out and have an 8 to 10 sack year? Yeah, surely. But what we saw from him, if he can stay healthy, that was the bugaboo there in Denver. When he had 9.5 sacks over 2 seasons for Denver before last year, I think that's kind of what they can get from him. If you can get 8 to 10 sacks from Josh Sweat, you get 5 to 8 sacks, 5 to 7 sacks from both Zaven and from Browning. Then they add Jordan Birch, their 3rd rounder out of Oregon. He's a massive human being. I don't know how much he'll play, but 2-3 sacks as a rookie in that 4th role. And then they've got Xavier Thomas, a guy that they like and was super productive against backups in the preseason. So when you bring BJ back, where does he fit? And so they moved on without him. And if you get anything from him, fantastic. Bilal Nichols, I think this is 100% speculation. I think he's done with football. He was one of their, because the Cardinals signed Justin Jones and Bilal Nichols to 3-year deals last year, really bolstering their defensive line. It gave them 2 really solid, they're not great, but solid NFL starters to strengthen the defensive interior. Both had not missed a game in 2 or 3 seasons. And what do? Justin Jones tears his triceps after 3 games. Bilal Nichols has a neck injury after 6 games. Bilal Nichols, neck injury, week 6. If that's the thing that's going to heal, right? Regular neck injury, they're fine for the offseason. Bilal Nichols has a neck injury in August, almost September. That tells me I'm thinking he's done with football. But why is he still on the roster? Well, he had $6 million in guaranteed money. So why would he retire? And so
that's true.
Why would you retire when you have guaranteed salary on the table for an injury? And so you just rehab, take your money. His 3rd year contract is non-guaranteed, so he can be cut. He can retire after this year. But I do not expect anything out of Nichols, because a neck injury that lingers for 9 months.
Sure.
That's probably a career ender. Okay. Probably. That's my thought there. Justin Jones has a knee injury again. I'm guessing he's going to go on injured reserve to start the year with a knee injury, so he'll miss the first 4 games. But luckily, they signed Dalvin Tomlinson. They signed Calais Campbell, who are both better than Bilal Nichols and Justin Jones. right? They're higher end starters. They have Darius Robinson, their first round pick from a year ago, healthy, looking good. So they're top three now, very good. You've got Dante Stills and LJ Collier. They're fine. But here's the thing: they were the Cardinals' two most productive defensive linemen now, and they are now defensive linemen 4 and 5.
Yeah, much better
And
depth.
so
Yeah,
that defensive interior should be us. Like, they've already been testing. Justin Jones is hurt right now. Walter Nolan is hurt right now, and so the depth is tested. If it doesn't get tested more,
yeah,
you will have a very good run stopping team, which helps guys like Mac Wilson and Akeem Davis Gaither look much better than they would be with a Swiss cheese defensive line in front of them.
yeah. What about the Davis Gaither? Obviously, the new guy there, Mac Wilson. I guess you can't really be sure what you're going to get out of him. What they did get out of him, though, was a bonus. And maybe he just really worked out, and that's what happens from team to team. But they drafted Cody Simon and actually drafted the kid from Auburn a couple years ago as well. So this doesn't look like one of the strengths of the unit of the defense or even of the team. But what do you think as far as the unit itself? And Simon, has he shown anything yet as a rookie?
Simon has shown that he's been productive in the role that he's had so far. He's going to play special teams. My what I imagine this year is going to look like what he did at Ohio State, where he had to bide his time, ball out on special teams, and then we'll develop into a role maybe in a year from now, or maybe 2 years from now. Mac Wilson now moves to the Kaiser White role as the Mike. Remember, I talked to you in the offseason that I thought maybe Akeem Davis Gaither might have that. No, our lads had it right. Mac Wilson is the Mike because they just moved him over. He's got the green dot, calling the defensive plays, relaying the defensive play calls, and which, going back to his roots, that's what he was. He was a physical Mike backer. Now, what you are going to lose is some of that flexibility that he had is coming off of rushing off the edge, but they improved their edge presence, so they might not need that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Davis Gaither has athleticism, can play, and I think if you look at where Jonathan Gannon comes from, if you look at Monty Austin, general manager, how do they view the off-ball linebacker? They don't put high capital into it. You don't put high capital into it. If you look at T.J. Edwards, was a day 3 pick. You get cast-offs. You get guys, and kind of I was reading kind of what might be the new way to develop backers instead of going after high-priced free agents, unless that's what you need to go over top or top picks, is you let another team let a day 3 pick who done mostly special teams develop for 3 years for another team, and then bring him over when he's ready to, and then sign him and then put him in that role. And you don't put a high capital value on inside linebackers, because as long as you're looking for certain traits, if you've got the pass rush presence and you've got the guys to keep them clean up front, you're going to have productive inside backers.
Okay, so rounding out with the secondary, going back to the injury situation here, Murphy Bunting on his NFI, and unfortunately Thomas, who was competing for playing time, maybe even a start, right? And now he's out.
He was a starter last year, yes. Murphy Bunting suffered an off-season knee injury. I think he tore his ACL doing something, maybe playing basketball or something like that. So he's done for the year.
That's why he's on NFI. It was off the field. Okay.
It happened in the offseason, and he needed knee surgery, and he's out for the year. Okay. Star Thomas tore his ACL in practice. He's out for the year. Now, and the Murphy Bunting news came out after the draft, which made things make more sense, because they drafted 2 cornerbacks. Like, why are you drafting 2 cornerbacks? And they keep drafting cornerbacks. They keep drafting I think they've drafted 7 in 3 years. But Murphy Bunting would have been would have been one of their top starters. And like last year, they had basically a 4-man rotation. They had Murphy Bunting and Star Thomas would start on the outside, Garrett Williams playing inside, and then Max Melton rotated on the boundary. Their second round pick a year ago rotated in for both Thomas and Murphy Bunting. Murphy Bunting's done for the year, and then you draft Will Johnson, and it looks like you've got your nice 4-man rotation like last year, so that Will Johnson doesn't have to be. He could be the guy, but doesn't have to be the guy. So you've got Star Thomas and Max Melton and Garrett Williams and Will Johnson. Maybe Will Johnson plays well enough to push Thomas into a fourth corner role. Then Star Thomas tears his ACL. So now the top 3, you know who it is. It's Garrett Williams, a very good slot guy who's now going to play on first and second down on the boundary. You've got Will Johnson, second round pick this year, high, but considered top 15, top 10 talent in the draft. And you've got Max Melton, the second round pick guy from a year ago. So their cornerback room is very young. And the guys behind them aren't much more experienced. Denzel Burke, 5th round pick this year. They like him. Keitrell Clark was a 5th round pick 2 years ago, maybe 6th round pick. I don't remember. And then Elijah Jones, the 6th cornerback on the roster, was a 3rd rounder last year. Who's got length, athleticism, ball skills, but didn't play last year. He was on injured reserve all year, and really, I think is kind of coming to an own. There's 6 cornerbacks on the roster. That's too many. That's especially when they've got 5 safeties as well. I don't think they're going to keep that many. I would bet there's an injury somewhere that we haven't heard about, or there's going to be a trade.
Okay.
And that's my prediction, because I think Elijah Jones has some trade value, even though he hasn't done anything, because he was a 3rd round pick. He's 6'2". He's got sub 4.4 speed. He's got long arms. He's got great ball skills, but he hasn't done anything here yet. Keitrell Clark maybe has trade value because he can play inside. He can play outside. He can play safety. So he's got some versatility there, can play special teams. But yeah, so basically it's going to come down to, Max Melton was solid the second half of last year. We know what Garrett Williams is. He's a very good slot corner, going to get paid a lot of money next year. And especially if he plays well on first and second down. Will Johnson, if he lives up anywhere to the billing that he was, if he's at least what Max Melton was last year, their cornerback room is solid. You've got potential of solid to some greatness, solid to great, right? But it depends on how.
Yeah, there's
Melton
a good upside there. Yeah, if
there's really high
clicks.
upside, and what you should get is solid to great play from the cornerbacks, and their 2 top safeties, Budda Baker, one of the best in the league, Jalen Thompson, respectable. Like, he didn't have a great productive year last year, but is capable. So they've got a good safety group. Last year's 4th round pick, Rabbit Dadrian Taylor Demerson, he's going to have an increased role. They're going to find ways to put him on the field. He is, from what I've seen in camp in the preseason, he's got a little bit of Budda to his game. He's not as fast as Budda, but he is built just like him. He's got better ball skills than Budda. One of the biggest downsides, kind of one of the big criticisms of Budda, even coming out of college, is his inability to get interceptions, and that's been Budda's. He's a hitter. Taylor Demerson, he was an elite ball skills guy at Texas Tech. I think he had 13 interceptions over his last 3 years, and is a playmaker. So I expect him to have a role this year, and he's probably the Jalen Thompson in the last year of his contract is quietly going to disappear after this year, and Taylor Demerson will be the guy back there with Budda.
Okay. So we'll definitely see how that shakes out. Again, if it goes down to 10 DBs, but like you said, yeah, it's very young. And matter of fact, the oldest corner then is Garrett. And boy, how old is he?
He's in year 3.
He is 24. Wow. So he's young. He came in young. Okay.
He did.
All right. So that would be, is that then, even though it's a young secondary, which part of the entire team are you the most concerned with?
Honestly, is, as always, it's what will the front look like?
Offensive line?
No, the defensive line.
Defensive line.
They added, but they've had really bad luck with injuries on the defensive line. And so they put so much money onto the defensive interior and the defensive edge. I guess Like it's my worry simply because that they're expected to be better. And that was basically they threw all the money on that because it was their biggest deficiency. And if they're not markedly better, then you don't have a markedly better team because their offense is basically the same. So they should look better because Marvin Harrison should be better. But I don't like how much better can that offense be when it's a run first offense and you get great running? They were in the top 5 running team already last year. If you just get a little more from Harrison, you get a little more. So I'm not worried about the offense. I just like my worry is that the investment doesn't pay off. Now, where is perhaps the weakest link? I think it is at the potential to ruin things could also be at the cornerback position, because if you suffer any more injuries, like you've got your starting 3 you
Sure.
like, but what if they're not? What if Melton doesn't pan out as a second round pick? What if Will
Sure.
Johnson isn't elite?
Yeah.
Then you've got okay. And so yeah, it's really kind of that. It's does the investment pay off up front? They've got the guys to do it, but Dalvin Tomlinson is nearly 30. Okay.
Yeah, that's true. Him. Oh,
Calais
and
Campbell is
Campbell's.
an old man.
Oh yeah.
He's not going to play tons. Josh Sweat, is he going to be as effective as a pass rusher when he doesn't have the Philadelphia Eagles
Yeah.
defensive line?
He better. That's what the Cardinals are paying him for,
They are. They
and
are.
that's what they need. Yep.
19.1 million a year. That sound like 2 years ago that was elite money, but though I talked about in the offseason, 30 million is the new 20 million for pass
Yeah.
rushers. 30 million is like the elite pass rushers are getting 30 million a year. So 30 million is the new 20, because it was just a couple of years ago, like the elite players are getting that 20 because
Yeah.
the non-quarterbacks are getting 20. But at Josh Sweat at 19 million, when you look at the other edge rusher contracts out there, 30 million is the new 20. So 19 for a solid but not elite rusher.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
perfectly respectable.
Yeah. Sweat is not elite. Of course, the Cardinals would like him to be elite, and that would be huge.
Yes.
So it looks like Fryer is the only CFA who made the team,
Yes.
and legit. He'll. You think he's going to hold on and keep that job?
Hey, it helps that they really like Ohio State guys, and their offensive line coach was his offensive line coach at Ohio
Oh,
State a year ago.
no, cool. Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
So the top of it, you look at Josh Fryer's offense, his Ohio State. Is he a high end guy? No, but he's a guy that sticks around. Paris
Okay.
Johnson loves him. He's a guy that's going to have it. Before you know it, he's going to be a great player. He's going to start for 10 years, and you're going to be like, wait, what? But no, like I think they drafted Christian Jones a year ago, but he's injured twice now. He missed a good chunk of last season. He's going to start on IR this year. Kelvin Beacham's their main backup, and
Yeah.
he's solid. But I think they like what Fryer offers in upside. Does it mean he's going to be a starter? Is he going to take over for Jonah Williams next year? I'm not going to guarantee that, but
Yeah.
I think they think maybe he could. But they like him enough, and I mean, he's got that Ohio State. They love Buckeyes on the Cardinals. They love Buckeyes on
Yeah.
the Cardinals. Paris, Marv, Fryer, Cody Simon, Denzel Burke. They love their Buckeyes.
Well, it's not a bad program to develop players from. That's for sure. Okay, so let's see. So Chad Ryland, that's a nice young kicker. Does he have to kind of prove himself again, or has he done really well in camp? Everything looks fine.
Everything looks fine so far. You know, if there's one area where I don't feel like I feel good, but it definitely could go wrong, it's kicker, because they had Matt Prater for the last couple of years, one of the most reliable and
Yeah.
best, like honestly, the best clutch kicker in the history of the NFL. If you're looking at he has in his career, in the final 2 minutes of for game-winning, game-time field goals at the end of the fourth quarter and overtime, you know how many times he's missed in his entire career? One time, and that was 2023. And Cardinals fans argued because he missed that field goal to beat the Seahawks in week 18.
Oh, it's one of
Had
those
he
deals. That's right.
Well,
Yeah.
and had they beaten him, they wouldn't
Yeah.
have picked number 4. They would have lost out on Marvin Harrison. So
So they still loved him for it. Yeah.
we all said he was following the script.
Yeah.
He knew the assignment.
Yeah. He couldn't lose. Yeah.
Ryland was great last year. He was fantastic. He comes in after they signed him after Prater got hurt, and he kicks game-winning field goals in 3 of his first 4 games. He had great leg. He hit a so he said he said when he was with Tennessee, he hit an 80-yarder in practice.
Yeah. Okay.
He had a 72-yarder in a preseason game this year, and that was making the rounds. So he's got the leg. He was good last year. What we know about young kickers, though, good year doesn't mean they're going to have another good year, and especially because when he was with the Patriots his rookie year, was not good. Was 16 of 25. He missed a lot of field goals. Very inconsistent.
Yeah.
But you see young kickers do that all the time. Like Zane Gonzalez came out of Arizona State, was the best kicker in the country. He was good for a year, then very inconsistent. We saw it with Chandler Catanzaro here in Arizona when he took over Jay Feely. He was nails for a year, then inconsistent. That the great kickers are consistent over and over and over again. Is Chad Ryland going to be one of those guys, or is he one of those typical young kickers who have up and down years? And so that I think that might be the area that could be a make or breaker, because if you have a kicker, you put him in for a game-winning field goal, you expect to make it. But what if he's inconsistent this year?
Yeah.
And he just has the 1-year track record. He just has 1 year of good and 1 year of bad. And so we'll see.
Well, it's sort of like these young quarterbacks.
Yeah.
And even more so, especially because of that. You're right. And that's what I think affects some of these kids that do get drafted as kickers. And
Ryland was a guy that didn't get drafted. I think he was a 4th-round pick for the Patriots in 2023.
So there's a lot of pressure, and that definitely is something that these kids don't necessarily handle well. And sort of like quarterbacks, but as we've seen with quarterbacks lately, give him another change of scenery, give him a couple of years, and then all of a sudden that talent that you thought he had is there. He just needs to harness it a little bit better, a little bit more mature. And maybe this is exactly what Arizona needs, because you feel like if he has one good solid season after what he did last year, that could be all he needs to have another good 10-year career. So
it'd be great to be, especially as young as he is. It was a perfect timing for Prater, who was at the back end of his career, to have a guy in the building that can do it. They're signed through this year. He's going to be free agent next year.
Yep.
You can sign him to a deal, and he can be your kicker for the next 10 years.